Be turning to Psalms 24 as a beginning place. It's none of your business. So what do you think is none of your business? That's a general rule. What does most people think is no one else's business? Our money ends up being nobody else's business, right? As Jerry and Rick and I was laughing, talking about how much men can spend money, and our toys end up costing all kinds of stuff and buying more and more stuff. Our toys cost quite a bit. I know mine do. And but just was a thought. I've delivered the message and topic. God does, and verse 10 goes to him, and then everything else is still his to control and go with. I'm just a steward of it. It's not mine. But I kind of thinking about, because I run across conversation with people, and with my job I run into it, and then just as at work, and then other times, and then soccer season, and then through church. Money is a funny topic. You can really get someone riled up quick talking about money, and no one likes to talk about their own money, and sometimes I get defensive as well about it. So the study came contemplating why is it none of your business? Defensive reflex about money. The whole concept, how willing are you to share your budget with people and let someone else know what you make? In a workplace, one of the worst things that can happen at a workplace is for everyone to know what everybody makes. That causes more problems than anything. If everyone knows what the other person makes, it causes all kinds of problems and gets around. So money just can cause problems in relationships and marriages. About any relationship you have, a conversation about money can ruin it, and you need to stay out of it. But I want us to examine why. Now, there is a form of secrecy to it, because it is none of the business. The aspect of it causes a stumbling block, where it talks about not to be a stumbling block for someone else. So we don't want to offend someone. We don't want to be a stumbling block. But I'm not talking about others as much as they own me and us. And so examine your own self. How do you feel if someone gets in your money business? If someone wants to look at your budget and figure out if you're wasting money or not. If someone wants to ask, where's your money go? If you're having trouble, how do you respond to it? You know, if you hurt yourself, and oftentimes we turn ankles, we hurt feet, we have people on crutches, we have people hurt on this, we have people hurt on that. And if you are physically hurt and you need someone to help you, and someone sees you hurting and you need help walking or something, and someone says, well, what happened? It's normally, we may be embarrassed, well, I tripped and fell. But ultimately, we will go ahead and share, well, I hurt my ankle, I turned my ankle because I wasn't thinking and I wasn't looking where I was walking, and I just stepped off, walking back from the bathroom the other night. The Lord protected my ankles and walked off the road. Just stepped off in the ditch all of a sudden and stumbled and, did a little stumble and turned my ankle, and I ended up back up. But it wasn't. My ankle was a little, tender, and I checked everything out. It's like, well, I never hit the ground, and but my ankle was a little sore from a little turn. It could have been bad. And if I would have hurt myself on that, I would have been embarrassed to admit that I just was walking in the dark and fell off the road. But yet I would let someone carry something for me while I use the crutches, or let someone assist me to get around. But then financially, when we do something and we're hurting financially, and someone says, well, what happened? What's the reflex thought? None of your business. If I stumble and fall and scratch a knee, I'll embarrassingly tell you what happened. But if I make stupid moves financially and I'm hurting, and someone asks, well, what happened? It's, what's none of your business. Well, let me help you with that. Well, it's none of your business. We just have a different mindset, don't we? We're not as willing to share that. So I want to go to Psalm 24 and read just a few verses. Again, I actually, my notes I have here took a while to condense down, and even with what I have here, I could do probably a full week lecture, seminar, PowerPoints to get around. I try to keep it down to preaching to the choir this evening. But even at that, I want us to realize and to be conscious of other people and ourselves. Why do we get so defensive? Do we forget money at work? How many spend 20s and thousands of dollars on houses and do stuff. And it's not proper for me to tell everyone what I spend on other people's houses, right? It's offense about it. It's not my money. I'm managing the taxpayers' money. I'm managing Department of Natural Resources money. I'm managing South Central Community Action Agency's money. It's not mine. All the boards I'm on, managing. I can run budgets and do stuff for other people really good. I'm just not so good with mine. But it's because there's a flip in my brain. It's mine. And I got to realize it's not mine. The money we have in our account is no more ours than anything else. It's God's money. We're just a steward of it, right? So when you realize that, it becomes easier to spend it better. So Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend in the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfulness, he shall receive the blessings from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation. God doesn't own a percentage, does he? God owns it all. It's all, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein, and everything about it is. And again, we can go on and spend time talking about possessions is not the same thing as just ultimately ownership. But before we ask what should I do with that, I need to realize whose it is. Because one of the things you go talking about budgets and going through, and as I've gone through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, and every dollar has to have a name. You got to assign it. I understand all of that logic, and one of the best budgeting techniques is to realize everything has to have a name. And that's good advice, financially speaking. When you get paid, you name every dollar of where it's going to go. But a better question before that should be, whose is it? Whose dollar is this? And in our minds, we go thinking about tithe as if, 10% is God's. You ever said that? 10% is God's? Correct yourself. It's not. 10% is not God's. How much of it is God's? All 100. He just tells you where everyone spends 10% at the same place. And some people spend more than 10% at that place. Some people do 15 and 20. You can tithe more, do whatever. But God's in control of every bit of it. It's all his. So the steward in verse 1 and 2 of Luke 16, because this was what the manager. A steward manages what belongs to somebody else. If God is the owner, I'm just accountable for how I handle what he's entrusted me. And maybe this is why we get so defensive when someone says, what'd you spend your money on? Or how much money do you have? Or how much do you make? Or why are you having trouble? Why do you have needs right now? Why? Because deep down at core, we know our mindset's wrong about it. Because we think it's ours and it's not. It's God. So there's an alarm that can go off, basically. An offensive attitude should be an alarm. We're not right with God. Because if you get offended because someone's disrespected you, you're not right with God, right? Because we should be humble. If we get offended because someone didn't do what we wanted them to do and they said something mean to us, we're being selfish. We're too much about I. So anytime you're offended, then I want you to be able to examine yourself. Why am I so offended? Now, they may be wrong. They may do something wrong, and it may not be needful for them to have the information they're seeking. You may not have to tell someone what you make or what's in your account or what you did with it. In a form, it is no one's business between us and God what we do with what He gives us, right? Do your alms in secret. There is a secrecy about it. I'm not wanting accountability and everybody show your check accounts tonight. Don't want to know. But if it offends you that someone talks about your money, I want you to examine yourself and ask you and God, why does that offend me so much? Is my priority wrong? Because the love of money is the root of all evil, right? So again, this evening, don't take me wrong. I'm not saying we've got to be more open and share our money with everyone, and we need to just have transparency with every penny we make and every penny we have. I'm not. but the emotion that we get behind it. I want money to have its place in our priorities, right? So Luke 16:1, we're stewards, because especially if we're stewards, there is a privacy behind that, because it's God's money for me to tell you, not to tell you about. As I referenced already, my day job, it's inappropriate, it's unethical. I'll get fired if I start telling about money across the table, right? Because it's their money that I have to keep it that way. So there is a privacy behind it, but let's realize it's God's privacy, not ours, right? We're stewards. It's his money. Luke 16:1, he said unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig to beg. I am ashamed. I am resolved what to do, that what I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me in their houses. And he goes and kind of does a pretty nifty little thing to get favored. We get caught up in the latter part of this. I want us to examine verse 1 and 2. Steward is someone managing somebody else's. And the whole thing was, a certain rich man had a steward, and then he had heard someone accused him that he was wasted his goods. What if someone accused us of wasting the money God gave us? Some of the toys that we buy, some of the things that we do with summer budget. What if we were accused of wasting the money God gives us? Would we have a leg to stand on in arguing? I wouldn't. Yeah, right. I've wasted quite a bit of the money that God's given me. And so he was scared then. He called him and said to him, how is it that I hear? God does expect us to be a good steward, right? Of our money, of our time, of our life, of our relationships, of the love he gave us, of the spirit he gave us, of the word he gave us. Everything is a blanket. We should be good stewards, but do think about this. As a steward, we are stewards of everything. Stewardship always carries accountability. When was the last time you felt you was accountable to God to the 90%? You know, we're lucky if we give God the 10% as a people. And I hear all the time people say, well, I can't afford to tithe. Well, we can't afford not to tithe. But again, I want to stay away from that topic here, because this is not about tithing. This is just about, why do we get caught up emotionally with our money? If we're emotionally attached to our money, then maybe we need to examine where it's placed in our life. Maybe we love it too much, because we shouldn't have an emotional attachment to our money. We should have an accountability to God. So, and that does include secrecy. It does include proper usage. It does include it's between us and God. But as we expose this, let's go ahead and go to 1 Chronicles, backwards down in the Old Testament. The other 90% in 1 Chronicles 29, God doesn't own the first 10 I've commented upon already. He owns the other 90. And this passage is really cool when we read into this. 1 Chronicles 29 and 10. Wherefore David blessed the Lord before all the congregation, and David said, blessed be thou, Lord God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Thine, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For all that is in the heaven and in the earth is thine. Thine is the kingdom, O Lord, for thou art exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come of thee, and thou reignest over all. And in thine hand is power and might, and in thy hand is to make great and to give strength unto all. Now therefore, our God, we thank thee and praise thy glorious name. Definitely good worship time and glory and praising, acknowledging who God is. But 14. But who am I? And what is my people, that we should be able to offer so willingly after this sort? The rest of this verse, read slowly. For all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee. So if you highlight something or underline something, think about that phrase. For all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee. So the 10% we give to God, what is that? It's his. What about the 9 we keep to ourselves? Whose is it? It's his. The little 0.5%. He says, hey, here's this, give me 10% back, or 15, whatever. Again, I'm trying to avoid the tithing portion of it. Other than I'm referencing tithing, not to say that we have to give it, but to drive home, the rest of it is still his. What I do with the rest is still his. What I set aside for my mortgage, what I set aside for my insurance, what I set aside for my car payments, what I set aside for my toys. And my budget has a neat little line that says Jared wants. That's the category line. And my written budget actually Jared wants. There's Elizabeth wants, and a Jared wants, and a house wants, and a car needs, and a car wants, but once. There literally is a Jared wants, and I love that Jared wants because that's mine. Everything else is family, that's mine. And I can think that about it. But it's not mine, it's still God's, right? So what I go to Harbor Freight and buy with Jared wants, it still needs to be from God, right? It's still his. And when I realize it's all his, I don't get that offended if someone wants to know what I'm doing with my money. Because it's not my money, it's God's. So it still doesn't, that's God's money. I do what God tells me. Privacy waiver, there's these things. But how do we realize all we give God is his already? Let's go to Matthew 6. I used the word alarm already because I already wrote the bulletin. As you see on your bulletin, the alarm of offense. When talking about money makes me defensive, I need to examine why. My heart is too emotionally attached to it then. Verse 19 of Matthew 6, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So what is our treasure? If our treasure is money in the bank or something money in heaven, our heart should be with God. So again, if someone starts getting up in our business and starts meddling, as I've shared already, I'm not preaching on meddling tonight, but it's just as only if it's your money. You're only offended when you think it's your money. If it's God's money, it loses the offense. Again, it still can keep the privacy, but it loses the offense behind it. It's God's money. When I feel that there's a reaction rising up in me, I need to challenge myself of why. Why am I getting so offensive? Why am I feeling anger? Why am I feeling disgust? Why am I being annoyed? If it's triggering my emotion, then maybe I've got the priority wrong. It's God's money. I don't get offended when someone asks how much money I've got left in my budget at work. That's work's money, not my money. But I get offended if someone asks how much money is in my account, or it's none of your business, or don't worry about that, or could you afford that? As I ask people that sometimes, and I get asked every once in a while, could you really afford that? And the answer mostly is no. I probably couldn't have, but I did because I wanted it. But when it's God's money, then I can manage better. And just sharing the things that work in my mind better. It's God's. So I'll waste my stuff, but I don't want to waste God's as quickly. So let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. The love of money. We know the quote, the faithful steward should care for money without becoming attached to it. If money feeds the intensity personally, if it creates an intense offense, I need to examine whether it's gotten too close to my heart. Because things that you're truly intimate about should be secret, right? Your relationship between a husband and wife, the intimacy should be secret and no one's business. But if money has that same offense, then I'm too attached to it. I have too much love for it. My heart's too tied up in it. And 1 Timothy chapter, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And in this, we tend to quote that, but in our minds, we still don't quite grasp it. Because we think about, I came in with nothing and I leave with nothing, but we tend to think that we got something in between. But in reality, we never achieve nothing in between neither, do we? It's still all God's. Remember what we read in Chronicles? We're just giving God what's thine. We're just giving you what's yours. And that's all that we are. Everything that we have is God's anyway, amen? So it's not that we leave everything behind. And that's the whole mindset. Then, and Solomon writes sometimes about who knows what you leave behind, what you leave it to, who you leave it to, what they'll do with it. We really don't leave nothing behind because it never was ours. God just puts somebody else in the kind of out. So having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. So the desire here, verse 9, is they that will be rich. It's not being rich. It's wanting to be. You're going to fall into snares and temptations. What kind of snares and temptations? To get more. The snare and temptation is to chase a bigger job, to make decisions based off of that. And I was guilty this week of doing that. I was offered a job this week that I would love to have done. It's a job I think I'd be good at. It's a job I would love to have. And it's a job that almost pays what I make right now. But there's no retirement and there's no insurance. And I was like, I can't. I would love to do that. I just can't. I can't give up my retirement, which I got to be careful how I consider that, because God better be my retirement, right? And I can't give up my insurance. I got to be careful about that. God better be my insurance. So, but my initial rejection of it, the opportunity was, nope, sorry. It's not enough money for me. And that's here the snare of temptation, because you want to make more. You're worried about what's in it for me. What's in it for me? And those that want to be rich, those that are willing to be rich, they fall in temptation thoughts of what's in it for me. And that's a very bad thought to have, isn't it? What's in it for me? Because everything is for God. And many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. In verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. And again, in that many pierced themselves through with many sorrows and all the turmoil and stuff. You love money and you want more and you think it's not your business. It can cause you so much grief. But it's His. But wanting it for yourself is where everything goes wrong. It's God's. Matthew 6, let's go back to the steward comparison. The steward becomes the servant, because what I insist on controlling can eventually control me. If I insist on controlling money, then it's going to control me. If I insist that I'm going to be in control of this, then it's controlling me. So the question isn't simply whether I have money, but does money have me? Am I serving the mighty dollar? We understand that statement, don't we? So Matthew 6 and 22. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, the whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So I know I keep saying I'm not making the sermon about tithing, because I'm not. I'm trying to make it about the other 90. But if we have a mindset of tithing is 10% and 90% is ours, that's God mammon, right? This is God's, this is mine, this is God's, this is mine. Everything is God's. All of our money, all of our assets, all of our budgets and stuff is all about God. So, and again, I want to keep trying to hope you don't take nothing wrong. Luckily, I got a small crowd. When you meddle, it's good to meddle with a small group than a big group. But hopefully you all realize it's just the offense. And I don't think any of us have problems with our budgeting. I run across many people that do. And I realize sometimes if I ask them, well, let me help with your budget. And then but they don't want to disclose everything, because that's none of my business. Let me help you with that. But as I've shared, you ask someone why they're hurting financially, it's a different response than asking, why is your ankle hurt? Why is your arm hurt? Why are you physically hurt? That gets a different level of emotional answer than why are you financially hurt? And we need to realize that I get hurt because I'm not doing what I should be doing. The offense comes because I have something out of place. But no man can serve two masters. We can't just give God 10%. You can give God 15% and still be wrong with how you control your money, right? If you think it's yours. Let's close and wrap this up in Luke 14, because we're going to give account. And we need to be looking up front and figuring out we need to count the cost. And count at the cost whether you have sufficiency to finish it. And so it's importance of budgeting. That's definitely checking the budget out, right? Do I have enough? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation is not able to finish it, all that behold it began to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king goeth to make a war against another king, and sitteth not down first, and consulteth whether he be able to with 10,000 to meet him, and cometh against him with 20,000? Or else while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an embassage, and desireth conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. So here's the challenge. Finish it. I will never have sufficiency to finish anything on my own, will I? It's the strength of God. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And if I realize that, I don't have $1, you're right. It's not my money, it's God's. But if I sit down and count the cost, well, it's God's money. God has a way to make things work out, don't he? God has a way. I've experienced it in my life where God made things happen in ways that I never thought he could, because it's all his. But when you count the cost, just realize we're counting his money. He's included up front. The reason that I've concluded that I get offensive about money is because I think I have some, even if it's $1 or $2 or a certain percent. When I realize it's God's, I'm not offended. So again, I'm still not saying we have to disclose everything and open everything. There's still privacy to it. It's still between you and God, but it's God's money. And we shouldn't need to be offended about it. And we should be willing to have conversations in a non-offensive manner with others. And we should realize that the question up front is always, it's God's. And I used to think a lot that if God's out your heart, he's out your pocketbook. And I still believe that. But sometimes I think we need to pay closer attention to what we do with the pocketbook, because it's all God's. Stop meddling. Stay out of my stuff. Have any other prayer requests? I'm sorry? Yeah, I need it. This thing turned off here, so it stopped recording, so we can go ahead and